Before we begin, welcome. You're listening to History for Sleep, a place where we explore humanity's past slowly, thoughtfully, and without rush. If you enjoy calm, deeply researched stories that help you relax while learning something meaningful, consider subscribing, liking this video, or sharing it with someone who loves quiet history. It truly helps the channel grow. Now let's begin. Imagine a moment so quiet, so subtle, that it left no monument behind. No stone circle. No carved tablet. No written record. And yet, it may be the most important moment in human history. The moment when a human mind first turned inward and recognized itself. This is the story of the quiet dawn of consciousness. The long, uncertain period when humans may have first understood that they had thoughts, memories, intentions, and an inner world separate from the outside one. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually across tens of thousands of years. For most of human existence, survival was immediate. Hunger, cold, danger, movement. Early humans reacted to the world rather than reflected on it. They felt fear, pleasure, pain, and attachment much like other animals. But awareness of those feelings is something else entirely. Modern neuroscience suggests that consciousness is not a single switch that flips on. It is a layered process, a slow accumulation of abilities, memory, prediction, symbolism, language, self-reference. Each layer builds upon the last. So the question is not when humans became conscious. It is when humans became aware that they were conscious. Archaeology gives us fragments, not answers. We find tools long before we find art. We find fire long before ritual. We find survival long before symbolism. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans made stone tools with remarkable consistency. This suggests learning and transmission of knowledge, but not necessarily introspection. Then something changes. Around 70 to 100,000 years ago, the archaeological record begins to shift. We see ochre pigments used not for utility but for marking. Shell beads worn as decoration. Burials that suggest care for the dead. These are not acts of survival alone. They are acts of meaning. When a human decorates their body, they are thinking about how they are seen. When a human buries the dead with objects, they may be thinking about absence, or memory, or continuation. Some researchers call this the cognitive revolution. Others reject the idea of a sudden shift and argue for a long, uneven transition. But nearly all agree on one thing. By this point, humans were no longer just experiencing the world. They were interpreting it. Language likely played a critical role. Early language was probably concrete. Names for animals, warnings, directions. But over time, language became abstract. Words for emotions, for time, for ideas that could not be touched. Once a mind can label an internal state, that state becomes an object of awareness. Fear becomes something you have, not just something you feel. Thought becomes something you notice. Memory becomes something you revisit. This is a profound change. Some theorists believe consciousness emerged as a social necessity. As groups grew larger, humans needed to model the minds of others, to predict behavior, to understand intention. In doing so, they may have turned that same modeling inward. If I can imagine what you are thinking, perhaps I can imagine what I am thinking. This idea is supported by studies of modern children. Self-awareness often develops alongside social awareness. Children recognize themselves in mirrors only after they understand others as independent beings. Ancient humans may have followed a similar path. There are also theories that consciousness emerged through storytelling. Stories allow us to simulate experiences without living them. They allow us to reflect, to imagine alternative outcomes, to place ourselves in the past or future. Once humans told stories, they were no longer trapped in the present moment. They could think about themselves across time. And once you can think about yourself across time, you have a self. Some conspiratorial perspectives suggest that this transition was not purely natural. That altered states of consciousness, induced by ritual, fasting, or psychoactive plants, accelerated awareness. There is evidence that early humans used substances that alter perception. Cave art often depicts patterns similar to those seen in trance states. Shamans appear in many early cultures. These altered states may have allowed humans to observe their own thoughts from a distance, to realize that the mind itself could change. This realization can be unsettling, can also be transformative. Another theory suggests that consciousness emerged as a response to death. When humans began to understand mortality, they may have begun to ask questions. Where did they go? Where will I go? Who am I if I can stop existing? Burial rituals appear at the same time as symbolic behavior. This may not be a coincidence. Awareness of death forces awareness of self. Not all scholars agree. Some argue that animals already possess forms of self-awareness, that humans simply expanded an existing capacity. Others argue that what we call consciousness is an illusion created by language, that the mind narrates itself and we mistake the narration for a self. This idea suggests that consciousness is not something we discovered, but something we invented. A useful story the brain tells itself. If that is true, then the dawn of consciousness was not a biological event but a cultural one. A shift in how humans explain their own experience. And that shift may have happened differently in different places, at different times, in different ways. There may have been many dawns, not one. As we move forward, we'll explore how art, ritual, memory, and myth deepen this inner awareness, and how early humans may have struggled with the realization that they had a mind at all. For now, let this thought settle quietly. That the most important discovery humanity ever made was not fire, or tools, or language. It was the realization that there was someone inside doing the thinking. As this inner awareness slowly took shape, it did not arrive as clarity. It arrived as confusion. To realize you have a mind is not immediately comforting. It means realizing that thoughts can wander, that fears can exist without danger, that memories can return without invitation. Early humans likely did not celebrate this awareness. They struggled with it. The mind, once noticed, becomes noisy. Thoughts replay moments of loss. They imagine threats that are not present. They question actions already taken. This may explain why early consciousness is so closely tied to ritual. Ritual provides structure to inner chaos. Repetition calms the mind. Pattern creates predictability. Symbol gives shape to feelings that have no words. The earliest rituals were likely simple. Gestures, chants, movements repeated in groups. These actions synchronized minds. They reduced isolation. If everyone feels fear together, fear becomes manageable. If everyone mourns together, loss becomes bearable. Consciousness may have deepened not in solitude but in community. As awareness grew, humans began to externalize their inner worlds. They painted animals on cave walls, not as decoration but as presence. These images were not passive. They were engaged with, touched, returned to. Some caves show layers of paintings added over thousands of years. The same spaces revisited again and again. This suggests continuity of meaning, a shared inner landscape across generations. When you paint something that is not physically present, you are holding an image in your mind. You are representing thought itself. This ability changes how reality is experienced. The world becomes more than what is seen. It becomes what is remembered, imagined, and anticipated. Time begins to stretch. Past and future begin to matter as much as the present. With this expansion comes anxiety. Awareness of the future brings hope. It also brings dread. The future includes hunger, loss, death. Some anthropologists believe that early myths emerged as coping mechanisms. Stories that explain suffering. Stories that gave purpose to fear. If pain has meaning, it becomes tolerable. If death leads somewhere, it becomes less final. Myth is not primitive science. It is emotional navigation. It helps the conscious mind survive itself. As language grew more complex, so did inner life. Words allow us to divide experience, to say this feeling is different from that one. To say I am angry, not just overwhelmed. Once emotions are named, they can be remembered. Once remembered, they can be anticipated. Once anticipated, they can be avoided or sought. This gives rise to choice. Choice is central to consciousness. Animals respond. Conscious beings decide. Decision-making requires an inner reference point, a sense of preference, a sense of self. At first, this self may have been fragile, unstable, context-dependent. Some theories suggest that early humans experienced consciousness more as a collective phenomenon than an individual one. Identity was tied to the group, the tribe, the role. The idea of a private inner self may have developed later. Julian Jaynes famously proposed that early humans did not experience consciousness as we do today. He suggested that they heard their own thoughts as external voices, interpreted as gods or ancestors. This theory, while controversial, highlights something important. The experience of consciousness may have changed over time. It may not have always felt like an inner narrator. It may have felt fragmented, external, uncertain. Even today, consciousness is not uniform. In moments of stress, the mind feels divided. In moments of flow, the self disappears. In dreams, awareness shifts entirely. This suggests that consciousness is flexible, contextual, not fixed. Ancient humans may have lived closer to these shifting states. Ritual, trance, and altered perception were not escapes. They were normal modes of awareness. Modern life privileges a single state, focused, analytical, separated. Ancient life may have allowed many. This raises a quiet question. Did early humans experience consciousness as a gift or as a burden? The archaeological record suggests both. Art and rituals suggest wonder. Burial and sacrifice suggest fear. To be aware is to be vulnerable. Once you know you exist, you also know you can stop existing. This knowledge changes everything. As consciousness deepened, humans began to mark time intentionally. Seasons were tracked, cycles observed, patterns predicted. Calendars are not just tools. They are expressions of future-oriented thinking. They say we will be here later. We will remember. We will plan. This confidence in continuity is a form of self-awareness stretched across generations. Some researchers believe that writing marked another major shift. When thoughts could exist outside the mind. Once written, ideas could outlive their thinkers. Memory became external. This reduced the burden on the individual mind. But it also changed how people related to thought. Thought became objectified, inspectable, debatable. This further solidified the sense of a self who thinks. But long before writing, the foundations were laid. In the quiet moments, around fires, in shared silence, in repeated stories. The dawn of consciousness was not loud. It did not announce itself. It crept in slowly through reflection, memory, and meaning. And once it arrived, it never left. As consciousness settled more deeply into human life, it began to influence behavior in ways that went beyond survival. It began to shape judgment. Morality did not emerge fully formed. It evolved alongside awareness. To judge an action as right or wrong, one must imagine consequences. Not just for oneself, but for others. And not just now, but later. This requires a mind capable of reflection. Early moral systems were likely practical. Do not steal food from your group. Do not harm those who protect you. Care for children. But even these rules imply an understanding of shared experience. They imply that others feel as you do. This recognition is a profound cognitive step. Empathy is not automatic. It is learned. As humans became more conscious of their own inner lives, they became more capable of imagining the inner lives of others. This may explain why violence within groups declined even as violence between groups increased. Those inside the circle were seen as minds. Those outside were not. Identity and consciousness grew together. Who you were depended on who you belonged to. Totems, symbols, and shared stories reinforced this sense of identity. They told individuals who they were, where they came from, what was expected of them. This reduced uncertainty. Consciousness without structure can be overwhelming. Identity gives the mind a place to rest. Some anthropologists suggest that early social roles helped stabilize emerging self-awareness. Hunter, gatherer, elder, healer. Roles provided meaning. They told the individual how to act, what to value, how to measure themselves. Without roles, the question "who am I" becomes unsettling. This question may have arisen gradually, not as philosophy, but as unease, a feeling of dislocation, of being aware but not anchored. Myth and ritual filled this gap. They answered questions before they were consciously asked. Why am I here? Because the gods made you. Why do I suffer? Because the world is imbalanced. What happens when I die? You return to the ancestors. These answers were not meant to be debated. They were meant to soothe. Consciousness demands explanation. When none is available, anxiety grows. Some theorists argue that the earliest forms of religion were attempts to quiet the mind, to externalize fear, to give agency to chaos. If storms have intent, they can be appeased. If death has purpose, it can be accepted. In this way, belief systems may have been early technologies of consciousness management. Not false, not true, but functional. As societies grew larger, consciousness faced new challenges. In small groups, everyone was known. Intentions were visible. Trust was personal. In larger groups, anonymity emerged. You could be surrounded by others and still feel unseen. This created new forms of anxiety, new forms of identity. Names became important. Lineage, status. Written records later formalized this. But even before writing, memory of ancestry mattered. To know who you are, you must know where you come from. Genealogy is a map of identity across time. Some researchers believe that ancestor worship strengthened consciousness by extending the self beyond the present moment. You were not just you. You were part of a line. Your actions reflected on those before you and shaped those after. This expanded sense of self may have encouraged long-term thinking, responsibility, restraint, but it also brought pressure. Consciousness does not just allow reflection. It invites judgment of oneself, by oneself. Shame is a uniquely conscious emotion. It requires self-evaluation. It arises when the inner observer disapproves. Shame may have played a role in regulating behavior, but it also introduced inner conflict. The mind becomes divided, one part acting, another watching. This division is central to modern consciousness, but it may have felt unfamiliar at first. Early humans may have experienced internal conflict as external forces, spirits, voices, omens. Rather than saying "I am conflicted," they may have said "the world is speaking." This interpretation reduces personal responsibility, but it also reduces isolation. If your thoughts are not yours alone, you are not alone with them. Over time, however, ownership of thought increased. Individuals began to say "I think," "I believe," "I choose." This shift marks a maturation of consciousness, a sense of agency. Agency allows innovation, but it also brings accountability. Once you know you are choosing, you can be blamed. This may explain why law and punishment emerge alongside complex societies. They formalize moral judgment. They externalize consequences. Law takes the burden of judgment off the individual mind and places it in a system. This again stabilizes consciousness. Throughout all of this, the inner world grew richer. Dreams became meaningful. Visions interpreted. Thoughts remembered. Consciousness was no longer just awareness. It was narrative. A story the mind tells itself about who it is and how it fits into the world. As we continue, we'll explore how this narrative self eventually led to philosophy, introspection, and the explicit question of consciousness itself. For now, let the mind rest in this earlier time, when awareness was still learning how to be human. Quietly, carefully, one thought at a time. As this inner narrative slowly stabilized, something remarkable began to happen. Humans started to think about thinking. This was not philosophy yet. It was not formal inquiry. It was a quiet turning of attention inward, moments of pause, a thought noticed instead of followed, an emotion observed instead of acted upon. This subtle shift marks an important phase in the development of consciousness. The mind became an object, not fully, not consistently, but occasionally. These moments may have emerged during rest, illness, grief, or solitude, times when survival demands temporarily loosened their grip. In these spaces, awareness could wander, and when awareness wanders, it sometimes returns changed. Early meditation-like practices may have arisen unintentionally. Long walks, repetitive tasks, staring into fire, listening to rhythmic sound. These activities calm the nervous system. They reduce external focus. They make internal experience more noticeable. In such states, thoughts feel less urgent, more distant. A person might notice a thought arrive, linger, and pass. This is not something that needs to be taught. It happens naturally when conditions allow. But once noticed, it changes the relationship to the mind. You are no longer only inside the thought. You're also watching it. This watcher is one of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness. Who is watching? Ancient humans likely did not ask this question explicitly, but they felt its presence. It may have been experienced as a spirit, an ancestor, a guide. Many early cultures describe a double, a shadow self, a soul that observes and survives. This may reflect an early attempt to explain the feeling of awareness observing itself. Some scholars argue that the idea of the soul emerged directly from this experience, not as superstition but as interpretation. If there is something inside that watches, it must be something. Language seeks nouns, so it becomes a soul. As societies developed writing, we see the first recorded reflections on inner life. In ancient Mesopotamia, texts describe dreams as messages. In Egypt, the heart is described as a seat of thought. In India, early texts speak of layers of self. These are not scientific models. They are experiential ones. They describe how consciousness feels from the inside. This is important. Consciousness cannot be observed externally in its entirety. It must be inferred from experience. Ancient thinkers did not have brain scans. They had introspection. And introspection, though imprecise, is powerful. In ancient India, long before neuroscience, people explored attention, desire, suffering, and identity through direct observation of the mind. They noticed that thoughts arise on their own, that attachment causes pain, that the sense of self can dissolve under certain conditions. These observations suggest a highly developed consciousness, one capable of sustained inward attention. This does not mean all ancient humans were equally aware. Just as today awareness varied. Some lived mostly in reaction, others in reflection. Consciousness is not a universal constant. It is a spectrum. Some individuals may have experienced awareness more vividly. They became shamans, sages, storytellers. They articulated what others felt but could not name. Over time their insights spread, not through instruction alone, but through practice. Rituals that quieted the mind, stories that invited reflection, symbols that pointed inward. As awareness deepened, humans began to question the nature of reality itself. If thoughts can deceive, what can be trusted? If perception changes, what is real? These questions appear in ancient philosophy across cultures. In Greece, thinkers debated whether reality exists independently of perception. In China, philosophers questioned whether distinctions are real or constructed. In India, thinkers explored illusion and awakening. These traditions arise independently, yet they ask similar questions. This suggests that once consciousness reaches a certain depth, certain questions become unavoidable. Who am I? What is real? Why do I suffer? Can awareness change? These questions do not emerge from survival. They emerge from reflection. Some conspiratorial interpretations suggest that advanced states of consciousness were once more common and later suppressed. That societies moved away from introspection toward control. That systems of power discourage deep self-awareness because it reduces obedience. There is limited evidence for deliberate suppression. But there is evidence that modern life discourages stillness. Ancient life had more silence, more repetition, more opportunity for inward attention. This does not mean ancient people were more enlightened, but they may have had more access to their inner worlds. As civilizations grew more complex, consciousness became busier. More roles, more rules, more noise. The mind adapted, but something was lost, the ease of stillness. Yet the capacity remained, passed quietly, from teacher to student, from elder to child, from story to story. The dawn of consciousness did not end. It continued. It continues now. Each time a mind notices itself. Each time a thought is observed rather than obeyed. Each time awareness rests without needing explanation. As you listen now, there is no need to analyze. No need to understand fully. Just notice. The presence that is listening. The awareness that receives these words. This is the same awareness that stirred slowly in the minds of early humans. It has changed in expression, but not in essence. It has always been quiet, and it has always been here. That quiet presence does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It does not argue. It simply remains. Early humans likely encountered this presence not as an idea, but as a feeling, a sense of being awake behind the eyes. A subtle continuity that persisted even as thoughts changed. They may have noticed it most clearly at night, when the world softened, when the fire dimmed, when voices faded. In darkness, awareness becomes louder. Without constant external demand, the mind turns inward naturally. Images appear, memories surface, questions drift without answers. This nocturnal awareness may have played a role in the earliest myths. Dreams, especially vivid ones, blur the boundary between inner and outer reality. For early humans, dreams were not entertainment. They were experiences. If a dream felt real and waking life felt real, what was the difference? This confusion may have accelerated self-awareness. To recognize a dream as a dream requires reflection. It requires noticing that the mind can create worlds. Once that realization occurs, the mind itself becomes suspect. And fascinating. Many ancient cultures treated dreams as portals, messages from gods, journeys of the soul. But another interpretation is possible. Dreams revealed the creative power of the mind, the ability to generate experience without external input. This would have been astonishing. It suggests that reality is not only something encountered, but something produced. This realization deepens consciousness. If the mind creates experience, then understanding the mind becomes important. Gradually, humans began to observe patterns. Thoughts repeat. Emotions rise and fall. Fear narrows attention. Calm expands it. These patterns may have been noticed intuitively long before they were articulated. A hunter who panics misses details. A calm observer survives. Over time, calmness became associated with clarity, stillness with insight. This association appears across cultures. Wise figures are depicted as quiet. Elders speak slowly. Shamans withdraw from noise. This is not accidental. Stillness allows awareness to separate from reaction. In this separation, something new emerges. Choice. Not instinctive choice, but reflective choice. The ability to pause before acting. This may be one of the most important milestones in the evolution of consciousness. To feel an impulse and not immediately obey it. To notice anger without becoming it. To feel fear without fleeing. This capacity changes everything. It allows cooperation. It allows planning. It allows morality. Morality is not simply rules. It is awareness applied to behavior. Without self-awareness, there is only impulse. With awareness, there is responsibility. Early moral systems likely emerged from this shift, not from commandments, but from observation. If certain actions disturb the mind, they are avoided. If others bring harmony, they are repeated. Over generations, these observations became traditions. Stories about right and wrong, taboos, rituals. These systems reinforced self-awareness. They required reflection. They asked individuals to consider consequences. This further strengthened the mind's ability to observe itself. As consciousness matured, humans began to create symbols to represent inner states. Masks, totems, icons. These objects externalized inner experience. They made the invisible visible. A mask could represent anger. A totem could represent courage. A symbol could represent awareness itself. Symbols allowed consciousness to be shared. Inner experience became collective. This is a critical development. When consciousness becomes collective, culture emerges. Culture is not just behavior. It is shared meaning. Shared meaning requires shared awareness. As societies grew, certain individuals specialized in navigating inner worlds. Shamans, seers, oracles. They explored altered states of consciousness. Through fasting, through rhythm, through isolation. These practices change brain chemistry. They alter perception. They dissolve the usual sense of self. In these states, the boundary between observer and observed weakens. This can feel like union, or revelation, or fear. Such experiences likely reinforce the belief that consciousness extends beyond the individual, that awareness is not owned, but accessed. Some modern theories echo this idea. Panpsychism suggests consciousness is a fundamental property of reality. Integrated information theory suggests consciousness arises from complexity. Others propose it emerges from recursive self-modeling. There is no consensus, but the mystery remains. How does matter become aware? Some conspiracy-minded thinkers suggest ancient civilizations understood consciousness far better than we do. That knowledge was encoded symbolically, hidden in architecture, lost in myth. While evidence is limited, it is clear that ancient humans took consciousness seriously. They structured entire societies around it. Modern life often treats consciousness as a byproduct, a side effect, something to be distracted. Ancient life treated it as central, not because they understood it fully, but because they felt it deeply. As you continue listening, there is no need to follow every idea. Thoughts will come and go. Attention may drift. That is natural. What matters is the awareness that notices. The same awareness that once noticed firelight flickering against stone. The same awareness that wondered quietly what it meant to exist. That awareness has never stopped evolving, and it never will. As awareness continued to evolve, it began to recognize its own limits. Early humans may have noticed that attention fades, that memory distorts, that certainty dissolves under pressure. This realization can be unsettling. To know that the mind is not perfectly reliable introduces doubt. But it also introduces humility. Humility is another quiet milestone in consciousness. It is the understanding that experience is partial, that perception is filtered, that one's view is not the whole. This understanding may have emerged slowly through conflict. When two people remember the same event differently, when dreams contradict waking life, when beliefs fail to predict outcomes, these moments create cracks in certainty. Through those cracks, deeper awareness enters. Rather than assuming the mind reflects reality perfectly, early thinkers may have begun to treat perception as interpretation. This shift is profound. If experience is interpretation, then meaning is flexible. If meaning is flexible, then identity is as well. This may be when humans first sense that the self is not fixed. That identity changes with mood, with memory, with role. A hunter is not the same self as a parent. A child is not the same self as an elder. Yet something remains constant: the witnessing presence. This paradox may have puzzled early minds. If everything changes, what stays the same? Some traditions answered this by positing an eternal soul. Others by suggesting a universal consciousness. Others by accepting the mystery without explanation. Each response reflects a different relationship to uncertainty. Some minds seek answers. Others seek peace with not knowing. Both are expressions of consciousness. As symbolic thought matured, humans began to encode these insights into myth. Myths are not primitive science. They are maps of inner experience. A god who dies and is reborn may represent the changing self. A journey to the underworld may represent descent into the unconscious. A trickster may represent the unpredictable nature of thought. These stories allowed consciousness to explore itself indirectly, not through analysis, but through narrative. Narrative is a powerful tool for self-understanding. It organizes experience. It gives shape to memory. It creates continuity. Through storytelling, humans learn to see their lives as arcs rather than moments. This sense of narrative self may have deepened self-awareness further. If life has a story, then choices matter. If choices matter, then reflection matters. This reinforces introspection. Over time, reflection becomes internalized. The storyteller moves inside the mind. You begin to narrate your own thoughts, your own actions, your own identity. This inner narrator is familiar to modern humans, but it had a beginning. Some theorists argue that this narrator emerged alongside language. Others suggest it arose earlier through imagery and emotion. Regardless, once the narrator appears, consciousness changes. Experience is no longer just lived, it is commented on. This commentary can be helpful. It can also become overwhelming. Modern humans often live inside this narrator, rarely stepping outside it. Ancient humans may have experienced more balance, periods of narration, periods of quiet presence. Silence was more accessible. Without constant stimulation, the mind naturally rests. When the mind rests, awareness becomes clear. This clarity may be what ancient traditions sought, not knowledge, but direct experience of awareness itself. Practices like sitting quietly, watching the breath, repeating sounds. These techniques appear across cultures. They are not inventions, they are rediscoveries. They work because the nervous system is shared across humanity. When the body calms, the mind follows. When the mind quiets, awareness remains. This awareness is not dramatic. It does not feel powerful. It feels simple. And simplicity is easy to overlook. As societies advanced technologically, attention shifted outward. Tools became more complex, environments more crowded. This external complexity demanded internal focus, less reflection, more reaction. Yet the capacity for awareness remained, dormant but present. It surfaces in moments of stillness, in grief, in awe, in love. Moments when the mind stops narrating and simply witnesses. These moments connect us to our ancestors. Across tens of thousands of years, the structure of awareness has not changed. The brain has evolved, culture has transformed, but the feeling of being aware remains recognizable. A quiet dawn, repeating itself, in every generation. As you listen, there is nothing to achieve, no conclusion to reach, just the gentle recognition that awareness is already here. Listening, observing, being. This is where consciousness began, and this is where it always returns.